I've got Jason Priester here. We're talking we're talking off-season changes for Clemson football. And Jason, I alluded to this in the past video. This is going to be a series of videos, folks. So definitely subscribe to the channel if you're not already, so don't miss any of these. We're diving into some fun off-season topics. But Jason, I mentioned this poll and the exact question. This was an X poll. Would you rather Clemson be 10-2 because they had better luck, that is, make a field goal here or fumble after crossing the goal line there, but make no coaching or transfer portal philosophy changes, or 8-4 but making these big moves? And 92% of people said they'd rather go 8-4 and actually make the changes. And I think the biggest one, the one that we know for sure, at least, because we're still waiting to see what really happens with the portal, but the one where we know for sure is changes on the coaching staff. Defensive end coach Lemansky Hall, quote, mutual agreement to move on. And Coach Thomas Austin is out as offensive line coach. And, you know, you've talked about this on your Clemson Tigers Junkies Facebook page and get reactions. And I found it really, really fascinating that folks are basically excited to see Thomas Austin gone. And I say that with all respect, but they're happy to see the change. But kind of bewildered to see Lemansky Hall gone. And from my perspective, it's almost the opposite. I thought the Lemansky Hall I didn't think they'd get rid of him because the defense overall was good, but I thought that was perhaps the biggest hole in the coaching staff, both in terms of bad process for how they hired him, grab a assistant coach out of high school ranks who was friends with Coach Sweeney, but also you just look at the player development. I thought it was poor. Did it surprise you? What do you think of the move? And we'll talk about replacements in a bit.
I think I've told you before in the past that if it was me, he'd have been at the top of my list. I just think development at defensive end has been underwhelming. High school recruits or defensive ends in high school used to line up to want to come play for Clemson. That's not the case anymore. You look at some of the guys they've landed, they either take forever to develop or they don't develop at all. We've talked about Cade Denoff and let's say Zaire Patterson. Those were two highly touted guys. They've been there 3 years now, and Patterson doesn't sniff the field. Denoff's barely done anything. KJ Henry, a 5-star guy, it took him 4 or 5 years to really start making his mark. Same thing with Justin Masco. I think he was fairly highly touted, if I'm remembering right.
Solid 4-star recruit, absolutely.
There's been, just to me, too many defensive ends that come through that take too long to start hitting their ceiling or don't hit it at all. And then you go start looking at the recruiting and the way it's falling off at defensive end. And that's not to knock the guys that are coming in this class. Because I think, Darian Mayo probably ended up being more highly rated than most of us thought he would be at this point, because I thought he took a big jump from his junior year to senior season. And Adam Kasaya's got a lot of potential. But, he's what I would call a developmental guy. So the recruiting's falling off. The development hasn't been where I think it should be. So to me, that's where I would have started.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying there. I mean, Adam Kasai is definitely developmental, not a first priority kind of take guy that they got because he's, he would have went to Minnesota, right? So that's where we're beating out for recruiting, which, hey, with Tyler Brown, it worked out. But I think that's more a little bit of luck there. I like Darian Mayo, but you mentioned KJ Henry, a big, I don't remember if he was a 5-star or a high 4, but a big time recruit. Took him five years. You look at Miles Murphy, he didn't get any better. You look at Maskell, he got better, but was never an above average player. He is even as a 6th-year senior. Even Xavier Thomas, which was more injury related, but still he was a 5-star that didn't really. His best rating per PFF was as a freshman. So just really no evidence of development. Now you're seeing that impact recruiting. So I think this was necessary. The other one is offensive line, where Thomas Austin is replaced. And I'll admit I wasn't mad at the time when they hired him. So I can't claim credit for knowing this one totally in advance. Obviously, when Robbie Caldwell was leaving, I would have preferred them to go out and get, Wisconsin's O-line coach or something like that. To me, that seemed better, but I didn't think it was a horrible move. Frankly, the offensive line hadn't been great under Caldwell, so I was happy for a new voice at the time. But it turns out that hiring the understudy of a guy coaching an O-line that still hasn't been that good really is not the way to go. So I think replacing him could have a huge impact, long term. I think that could be a really, really big net positive because some of the names we're hearing are big deal kind of guys. What are your thoughts on the change in offensive line coach?
Yeah, unfortunate, but again, I think it was necessary. I'm like you. I didn't have a big time problem with the hire of Thomas Austin. The offensive line wasn't terrible last year. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't great. It wasn't elite or anything like that. It wasn't terrible, but I just don't. What Garrett Riley wants to do on offense. I don't know if that fits what Clemson used to do. With his own blocking and stuff, he wants to do more pulling and run those counters and traps and stuff. And it's not the style or the system that Thomas Austin played in. So I don't know how well he coaches it. And when Clemson tried to do that kind of stuff this season, they were not very good at it, man. They didn't. They look slow. They look unathletic. I don't know if that's all coaching or maybe some of the guys they recruited in the past just they also don't match what they're trying to do. I mean, maybe it's a combination of the things, but it's Thomas Austin's also been striking out on the recruiting trail in this
I think
class.
that's a big part of it.
I think that is a big part of it, man. You go 0 for 3 on the in-state guys, and I get it. 2 of those guys you were probably never going to get. They were probably going to always end up at South Carolina, but one of them was from right there in Greenville. Still bad look to go 0 for 3 on those guys. And then you go 1 for 6 on the guys you invited to the big official visit weekend. I think that hurts more than anything. And then the late guys that you've been chasing, you can't land any of those. They landed the one, and Ronan O'Connell. He was at the official visit weekend, but those late guys that you started chasing, you hadn't been able to land any of them, and I'm not sure they're going to. We'll see. Elijah Thurman was in Columbia this weekend, so we'll see what turns of that. But and I know they just picked up a commitment today from Watson Young, but he's a legacy guy. Kyle Young's his daddy, so he's got ties to the program. I look at that one a little bit different, but he's really struggled on the recruiting trail this year. I thought he knocked it out of the park with his first recruiting class, man. I loved all 3 of those guys they signed, but he has really struggled this year. And, based on some of the things that I've heard, I think Dabo Swinney thought they could be better when it comes to offensive linemen, recruiting at that position. And he was not thrilled with some of the results in this class.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a really great point. Is the Garrett Riley offense is supposed to rely on a lot of counters, a lot of guards pulling, and they couldn't do it, and so you saw them have to simplify against Notre Dame. Now it worked, but you don't want your offensive coordinator to have to change a scheme because either the offensive line, for whatever reason, can't do it, and they're a bunch of 4 stars, even 5 stars, and they can't execute the pulls for the counters correctly. That's a red flag. All right, let's talk about the replacements, and let's just stay on the offensive line because this is a guy I'm really excited about. It's not official yet. We're recording this Sunday night, so we'll cut this if it ends up being wrong. But from everything I'm hearing, Matt Luke is destined to become Clemson's next offensive line coach. This is a guy who's been an offensive line coach in the ACC or SEC for 17 years. He was a head coach for Ole Miss. He was the co-OC and offensive line coach on the I guess is the Hugh Freeze Ole Miss teams that beat Saban twice. He won a national championship at Georgia. And the only reason he's even available is because after that national championship at Georgia, he chose to step away from football. And I've heard some people say that's a red flag for them. It's not at all for me. If you want to check it out, I'll try to remember to put a link in the video description here. He was on the Family Values podcast with Pastor Jay and David Pollock, and explained it and just wanting to spend more time with family. And honestly, to me, this is an example of Clemson's all about this family culture and kind of as much as you can be in a public school, kind of a Christian culture. And this is a guy that fits that to a T, even though he's not a Clemson grad, even though, he's not, part of the coaching tree necessarily, didn't GA under Sweeney or anything like that. But it seems like he fits the culture. And I mean, the expertise on the O-line, this is step change, take a weakness, turn it into a strength kind of thing. Are you as excited about this one as I am? Because I think this is a potential home run.
Home run. I was fixing to say the same thing. Knocked it out of the park. Yeah, I get it. He wanted to step away, to spend more time with his family and stuff. But I think you hit on it. I think working for Kirby Smart is very different than working for Dabo Swinney. The culture at Clemson is different. I don't think Sweeney's. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's demanding. I just don't think. I think that the two places are a little bit different, and the culture more suits to something that Matt Luke's looking for. I think he's the perfect fit, and he's kind of what Clemson needs in that offensive line room, because their lack of being able to put guys into the league is something that's hurt them on the trail for a long time. It's something that's been used against them for a long time. Now you get a guy with a proven track record. Um, it's just going to give you so much more credibility when you're out there trying to sell yourself to some of these high school kids who maybe in the past wouldn't have come to Clemson. Now maybe that Matt Luke's there, he actually gives them a look.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really optimistic about this. And I think that's a good point, is that it sort of flips the narrative on its head. This is a guy who won a national championship at Georgia where they were all about the lines of scrimmage, right? Particularly the offensive line. Well, both, but I mean, they were excellent on the O-line. Okay, the other name that we're hearing for defensive end coach, and again, these we'll have to cut this if I end up being wrong, but I feel pretty good about these being right, is Chris Rumph. Was actually with Clemson before from 06 to 10, so he was there for 5 years. That means he coached Gaines Adams, I believe, Daquan Bowers. He hasn't been anywhere for 5 years since. He's bounced around, but in a kind of a good way. He won 2 national championships with Alabama and those very defense-oriented teams in 2011, 12, and 13. He was there. Then he was with McElwain in Florida for a while, and he's been with the Texans, the Bears, and the Vikings since. He's currently on a leave of absence. Not going to speculate as to what's going on with him, his personal life. But the bottom line is he's been very successful. He's got years in the NFL now. And the other name they were talking about was Daquan Bowers, which is kind of feels like what they would have done 2 years ago, is just kind of promote from within. But now I think this is an opportunity. Again, Rumph hasn't been anywhere for more than 5 years, since that Clemson one where he was there for 5 years. Maybe Daquan Bowers can just do this when he's, say, 37 instead of 33, which he is now. What are your thoughts on their impending, seemingly likely decision for Chris Rumph?
Another home run. I love this one too. He's been around Clemson. He knows what the culture's about. He like you say, he spent 5 years there, and then also on top of that, he's been around a bunch of different other places. He was at Alabama, very experienced. I think just like with Luke and the offensive line, when it comes to recruiting, I think he's going to help you so much on the trail. Whereas I didn't think Lemansky was really getting it done. Now you got this guy with a proven track record. And a guy that's been at Clemson. I love both these hires, man. I can't say enough. I kind of heard Daquan Bowers' name getting thrown around there some too. At first I kind of thought maybe that's the way they were going to go, because like you said, Dabo likes to promote from within. The more I thought about it, the more I think he's going to go outside and get somebody to come in here and let Bowers do a little bit more maturing as a coach, and then maybe Bowers is the next guy when Rumph gets ready to move on and do something else, whenever that may be.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. Another home run, really, really encouraged. It's funny. People think I'm negative, or I've been called negative and dramatic. Hey, look, I haven't been this optimistic about this team since like the COVID year. He's making the changes that I've been begging for 2 years. I think they're going to have a really good staff. If they can add just a few portal players, they could have a phenomenal roster. So I think a lot to be encouraged about. So let's end there, JP. We can pick it up in another video and talk about bowl season before we wrap up.